Hello everyone, how's it going? I'm good, thanks. Last time on this channel I talked about how all entertainment kind of relies on recycling the same ideas over and over again. It's not exactly a new take, but it is one that applies to Transformers. Hasbro have never shied away from bringing back fan favourites. They've been doing it since day one, and the nostalgia factor for G1 has pretty much been relied on constantly since the early 2000s. There's a good reason for it. The original figures are classics, and we're all old and desperately trying to rekindle what little memories of our youth remain. I think many of us forget that G1 isn't where it all started for many young fans now. Like, a collector in his 20s probably started with Robots in Disguise or the Unicron trilogy. But if we dip back a few years between G1 and the shows I just mentioned, we get one of the most beloved eras of Transformers. The Beast era. There's a real nostalgia for that era now, especially because the Generations line is full of new versions of Beast Bots from that era. Hell, I've got one of them already. I'm not planning on talking about Kingdom Optimus Primal today. Maybe. I might. Instead, I plan to go back to the beginning. Folks, may I introduce to you one of my favourite Transformers of all time? It's Beast Wars Optimus Primal. Transformers had a rough few years after the original series ended, and long story short, Beast Wars was an attempt to revive the era with a new animal-themed approach. It worked very well. The show is considered a bit of a cult classic, although boy has it aged a little. That's the nature of early CG animation though. It's easy to forget that this lad was the centre of a split in fandom in 1996. Believe it or not, right, nerds on the internet didn't like the change. Truck not monkey they'd scream via their keyboards. I wasn't even online much back then, and even I had heard about it. I thought it was weird at first that Optimus was now a gorilla, but I got over it pretty fast, because the show was rad. Anyway, I didn't have the funds to buy figures for myself when the show first aired here in the UK, but the following year I got my first job at Toys R Us, and with one of my first wages, I brought this chap. And also a load of other figures. And whilst I love a lot of the Beast Wars range, it's Optimus Primal that really sticks with me. This guy and much of the range were a revelation for me at the time. Gone were the increasingly blocky guys. Colour schemes were toned down to somewhat less eye-searing colours, and in their place we had actual articulation. Optimus here has ball joints at the hips, a solid knee bend and a waist swivel. He got solid range on the shoulders too, and a nice elbow bend. There's also a gimmick at play, one of an absolute monkey load of gimmicks. See, there's a lever on his back that makes him swing his elbows like an ape going, well, ape spit. You can also move a small switch on his bicep that turns that elbow twist into a shoulder swing. Naturally, these come into play in his beast mode as a chest beating action. And how else can you use this gimmick? With weapons, of course. Primal here comes with two curved swords that can be swung about with a sort of force you would have thought would have triggered some sort of safety flag. But that's not it for weapons. You can pop open his right arm to reveal this skull-shaped mace. There's no way this is safe for kids. His left arm hides a spring-loaded missile launcher, the missiles for which can be stowed away behind his head. Perfect for taking an eye out at 20 paces. And we're still not done with the weapons. There's a small button hidden on his back which reveals two rocket launchers either side of his head, which seems dangerous, but he's a robot so it's probably okay. There's also a nice bit of weapon storage for the swords behind where the rocket launchers flip out from. Gotta say, it's pretty amazing how there can be all these weapons and they can all store away neatly. You may have noticed this odd thing behind his head. Well, that's the oft-forgotten gimmick of the early Beast Wars range, the mutant mask. Lord knows why, but most of the early figures have these secondary mutant faces that I guess are meant to be scary or something. I've never been sure on what they're about, but I assume they're a holdover from early designs. Normally I'd see people just put the mask in front of Optimus's face like this. But what I like to do is turn around the head and tilt down those Prime brand ear spikes and then fold out the mask. Gives him a bit more of an alien looking mouth. Transformation is pretty simple, mostly because you're turning a man-shaped thing into another man-shaped thing. Chest flap lifts up and flips to reveal a gorilla grimace. Shoulder flaps fold down. And then it's just a case of spinning the waist, folding the legs up, and then tucking away his robot toes and flipping out the 8 digits. Nice and simple, perfect for small children or aging men slowly losing all their faculties. Ugh, that's gone cold. And here's the chest beating action I promised earlier. Brilliant. What's also pretty great is that the shoulder missiles can still be deployed in this mode. I just lost the sword. What's also pretty great is the shoulder missiles can still be deployed in this mode. Lost another sword. What's also pretty great is that the shoulder missiles can still be deployed in this mode. The sword's fallen out again. You know what? I'm taking the swords out. What's also pretty great is that the shoulder missiles can still be deployed in this mode. I feel like if the apes in the film Congo had this, the odds would have been evened a little more. I don't know what else can really be said about this guy. He's an all-round fantastic guy that's loaded with play patterns that make him not just one of the best Transformers of all time, but one of the best toys of all time. Like, sure, the original Optimus Prime is an iconic, legendary toy, but in terms of pure play pattern, Optimus Primal here has him beat. Shame the same can't be said about his Kingdom compatriot though. I got this figure a few weeks ago, and while there's nothing inherently wrong with him, he's just not as much fun, much like the War for Cybertron TV series. The fun part, I mean. There's plenty of stuff wrong with that show. Anyway, the figure. He has swords and guns hidden in the arms, although they don't fire anything. There's also a rough approximation of the rocket launchers you can pop out over his shoulders, but they don't do anything, and they look a bit lame, and they're not spring-loaded. He's essentially a smaller version of the big boy here, but lacks all the fun. Sure, he's more posable and the transformation's more complex, but is that better? Maybe, but he just kind of feels like one of those serious slow covers of a pop song that never stopped being a bop in the first place. So yeah, that's Beast Wars Optimus Primal, one of my favourite figures of all time. I was thinking about making a habit of talking about other Optimus Primals. I've got a small selection, they've almost all got something interesting to talk about. I am missing the very first Optimus Primal though. Oh yeah, there was one before this. He's a tiny bat. A tiny, very expensive to get hold of these days bat. I'd like to thank you for watching. High five that like button and maybe give the subscribe a beating while you're at it. Tell me if you'd like to cover more Primals in future videos. That'd be prime, thanks. I'll catch you next time.